It was a cold winter evening in New York City, the kind where the chill in the air cuts straight to the bone. The streets were bustling, with people walking briskly to escape the winter frost, their collars turned up against the biting wind. Barron Trump, dressed in a smart coat and walking with his father, Donald Trump, toward a nearby building, was trying to blend in with the crowd, a rare moment of normality in his otherwise high-profile life. As they made their way down the busy sidewalk, Barron noticed a homeless man sitting near a street corner. His clothes were ragged, his face weathered by years of hardship, and a cardboard sign in front of him simply read, "Can you spare $1?" The man's voice was hoarse as he lifted his eyes toward Barron. "Hey, young man, can you give me $1? Anything helps," he asked with a touch of desperation. Barron's father, always focused on his own thoughts, didn't hear the plea. Barron, though, was taken aback. He wasn't used to being directly asked for money in such an honest and raw way. For a moment, Barron stood there in silence, his eyes meeting the homeless man's. The situation was real, raw, and without the usual gloss of media or luxury. He had grown up in a world of privilege, but in that instant, Barron felt something unfamiliar, a deep sense of compassion mixed with uncertainty. Without a word, Barron reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crisp, freshly minted $100 bill. He held it out to the homeless man. But instead of just handing over the money, Barron said something that would leave everyone around him stunned. "Here's $100, he said, "but I want you to promise me something." The homeless man, clearly taken aback by the generosity, squinted and asked, "What's that?" "Promise me you'll use it to turn your life around," Barron continued, his voice surprisingly firm for someone his age. "Not for booze, not for gambling. Do something for yourself. You can do it. I know you can." The man hesitated, his eyes flickering with disbelief. He hadn't expected this, not from someone like Barron Trump. After a long pause, he nodded, his voice trembling. I promise. Thank you, kid. Thank you." Barron smiled briefly, his gaze meeting his father's, who had now stopped walking and turned to see what was happening. Donald Trump's expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something, maybe pride, as he observed his son's unusual response. As Barron and his father continued on their way, the homeless man stood up, clutching the $100 bill in his hand. He watched them disappear into the crowd, his mind racing. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. That night, the story of Barron Trump's unexpected act of kindness spread like wildfire, surprising many who had expected something entirely different. News outlets, social media, and people on the streets all marveled at the gesture. Barron had given more than money, he had given someone a chance, a moment of dignity, and a reminder that even in the most challenging of circumstances, there could be a way out. The shock wasn't just that Barron had given so generously, it was that he had done it with such genuine intent. For many, it was a stark reminder that kindness could come from the most unexpected places. As the story of Barron Trump's unexpected act of kindness spread across social media, it quickly became a viral sensation. News outlets began reporting on the event, with people from all walks of life sharing their opinions and reactions. Some were amazed by Barron's maturity, others were skeptical, wondering if it was a staged or planned moment. But for those who witnessed it firsthand, it felt genuine, and that made all the difference. A few days later, the homeless man, whose name was Paul, appeared in a local news interview. He spoke tearfully about the interaction with Barron and how the young Trump had given him not only money, but also a sense of purpose. Paul explained that he had been living on the streets for over 10 years, struggling with addiction and battling a deep sense of hopelessness. He had tried to turn his life around before, but every time he found himself back in the same situation, he felt like the world had given up on him. "I never thought anyone would give me a chance again," Paul said, wiping his eyes. "When Barron handed me that bill and told me to promise him I'd change, it was like someone saw me. Really saw me." The media, initially skeptical, couldn't ignore the impact that Barron's words had on Paul. It wasn't just the money that had made the difference, it was the belief that someone cared enough to challenge him, to push him toward change. Within a week, Barron's gesture had inspired many others. People began donating to local shelters, volunteering their time, and reaching out to those struggling with homelessness in their communities. What had started as one simple act of kindness had created a ripple effect, and suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about money, it was about giving people the dignity, hope, and support they needed to get back on their feet. Barron's parents, Donald and Melania, were both proud of their son's actions, though they knew it would only add fuel to the already intense media spotlight on their family. Donald, known for his tough demeanor and business acumen, was quick to express his pride, albeit in his usual reserved manner. He did what he thought was right, Donald said in a public statement. I've always taught my children to have compassion for others, but also to expect responsibility in return. Barron's gesture shows that he's learned those lessons, and I couldn't be prouder. Melania, who had been more private about her family's personal lives, offered a more heartfelt comment. Barron has always had a kind heart, she said. I'm proud of him for showing the world that even small acts of kindness can create lasting change. For Barron, though, the response was more internal. He didn't seek praise or attention for his actions, and in many ways, he was humbled by the overwhelming support and gratitude he received. He didn't want to be seen as a hero, he just wanted to make a difference, even if it was in a small way. As the weeks went by, Paul began to make real changes in his life. He checked into a rehab program, sought out help for his addiction, and began working with local outreach organizations to help others who were struggling with homelessness. Paul would later say that Barron's words had stuck with him. You can do it. I know you can. That promise wasn't just a way to repay a debt, it was a lifeline that had given him the strength to start over. For Barron, it became a reminder of the power of a single moment. A moment when his words, his actions, had resonated deeply with someone else. He may have grown up in a world of wealth and privilege, but he had also learned, in his own quiet way, that no amount of money or status could replace the value of showing compassion and giving others the chance to rebuild their lives. By the time the story died down in the media, Barron had already moved on with his life, but he had left a legacy that went beyond his family name. It wasn't the fame or the attention that mattered to him, it was knowing that he had made a difference, in a way no one could have expected. As for Paul, he never forgot the young man who had given him a chance when he had nothing left to hold on to. And the world, for a brief moment, was reminded that kindness could come from the most unexpected places, even from a billionaire's son. Months passed, and the initial buzz surrounding Barron Trump's act of kindness began to settle, but the ripple effect it created never truly faded. Paul, now sober and steadily rebuilding his life, remained a symbol of transformation in the local community. His story, often shared in interviews and on social media, continued to inspire people who had once been doubtful that anyone could break free from the harsh cycle of homelessness and addiction. One afternoon, Paul received an unexpected phone call. It was from a representative of Barron Trump. "Mr. Trump would like to meet with you," the voice on the other end of the line said. Paul's heart skipped a beat. Barron? The same young man who had once handed him that $100 bill and changed his life. I'm not sure what to say," Paul stammered. "Why would he want to meet with me?" "It's about the promise," the representative said. "He wants to make sure you're keeping your word. He believes in you, Paul." Paul agreed to the meeting, though he was filled with nervous excitement. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but the thought of speaking with Barron face to face stirred something within him, hope, but also a certain sense of awe. When they met, it was an understated affair. Barron and Paul sat at a small cafe in New York, a quiet corner away from the hustle of the city. Barron was still the same polite, introspective young man, but his presence felt grounded and calm, despite the shadow of his famous family. Paul, who had once felt invisible in the world, felt suddenly seen. It was as if Barron had always known he could turn his life around, even when he doubted it himself. Barron looked at him without judgment, only an honest curiosity. "I just wanted to check in," Barron began, his tone warm yet direct. "You told me you'd change. How's it going?" For the first time in years, Paul didn't feel ashamed to answer. "I've been clean for 4 months now," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've got a job at a shelter, helping others. It's not easy, but I'm making it work. And I'm keeping my promise." Barron smiled, the pride in his eyes evident. "I knew you would. You've got this." The conversation shifted to smaller details, how Paul was adjusting to his new life, what it was like working at the shelter, and the support system he'd found. There was no grand gesture from Barron, no flashy check or public display. Instead, it was simply a conversation between two people, one who had offered a chance, and another who had taken it. Before they parted ways, Barron handed Paul a small envelope. "This is for you," he said. Paul opened it cautiously. Inside was a check, not for hundreds, but for thousands. It wasn't just a gift, it was an investment in Paul's future. "This is to help you with your next step," Barron explained. "You've earned it. Use it for something that'll help you build a future." Tears welled up in Paul's eyes as he looked at Barron. "You don't have to do this. You've already given me more than enough." Barron just nodded. "You're doing the hard work. I'm just here to make sure you know you're not alone." The encounter changed Paul even more deeply. It wasn't about the money, it was the recognition that someone believed in him enough to invest in his success, someone who had come from a life of privilege, yet understood the value of second chances. In the following months, Paul didn't just continue working at the shelter. He also began offering motivational talks to others who were struggling. His story spread, a powerful example of redemption. Barron's gesture, though quiet and without fanfare, had ignited a fire within him that he now used to fuel others. Meanwhile, Barron continued with his life, not in the limelight, but behind the scenes. He didn't seek attention or praise for his actions, he simply did what he believed was right. But the story of his compassion, of the moment he chose to make a difference, continued to inspire people across the country. It wasn't just about the money, the media, or the famous name behind it, it was about the courage to show up when it mattered, to offer more than what was expected. And, years later, long after the media had moved on to the next sensational headline, people still remembered the story of the homeless man and the young man who saw more than just $1, he saw the potential for change, and he made sure someone else saw it, too. "You said